Hi everybody, welcome back. Good to be with you again. Today I wanted to look into some records of the history of the weather around the Earth. Before I do, I just wanted to say thank you to Globebusters for sharing this link for this book with me. I did see it once a long time ago and I shared the link myself, but then I forgot the name of it and I've tried looking for it and I've just not been able to find it. But then when I saw it on one of their videos the other day, yeah, they were really kind enough to share a link with me. And if you don't know who Globebusters are, they're a channel on YouTube. You should get over there after this video. So this book is basically called The Atmospherical Origin of Epidemic Disorders of Health, and it explains how illnesses and epidemics and stuff on large scales happen due to the atmosphere on comets, basically. And this book, I'm only going to read out of a section of it, and it might be more than one video, but there's a lot of information, loads and loads of it. From my notes, you can see like there's different years that I want to read, really, and that's almost every year that I went past when I read this section that I wanted to bring up. So I just wanted to also say, like, if this information, which he makes notes at the bottom of each page of his references, so he might have been genuinely telling the truth when he wrote his book. Who knows if the information was true, I don't know, but it would blow climate change out of the water. I also think there's a possibility that this may be the reset system of God, may have been the cause of mud floods. You'll see as I start reading how it could all have come about by what I read. This also, unfortunately for me, it makes my real year calculations incorrect if this is true, because it rolls through from 4 AD all the way up to 1829. And I'm trying to explain that there was 1,000 years short there, so I don't know. You know, maybe numbers have been fiddled, maybe they haven't, I don't know. So at the moment I can't be sure either way. This could explain catacombs, child homes, and the destruction of free energy architecture. In what I'm going to read and the stuff that I don't read because I can't read it all, there's over 500 comets documented over 1,800 years. It works out like one every 3.6 years roughly. Refers to the guy that's writing the book, refers to a lot of days when things happened, celebration days, like now how there is Halloween and Easter Day and all that kind of thing. He refers to these other days, and he's talking about times like 1,000 years before his time. And the way he words them, it sounds like they still celebrate the same days 1,000 years later. It's quite strange. And then he does believe in a globe, so he tries to explain the celestial movements as such, but you'll see that as I read through. And apparently between 1767 and 1829, which are the last of the records, they were kept and stored by his own family, apparently. And there's a bit more information in them years. So before I got to the dates and the section that I wanted to read, I noticed this particular section here, this paragraph, and Augustus was in reign about the time of Yeshua, and it says, soon after the reign of Augustus, a pestilence swept the fertile countries of Asia Minor, which apparently is Turkey nowadays, that kind of area. And during its prevalence, an earthquake completed the work. A comet is mentioned at the same time as the cause, whose tail is said to, with one fell swoop, have hurled down a dozen fine cities at once. It's to this catastrophe that Tacitus alludes in the year 47. Whether the comet had a real connection with the earthquake remains to be proved. So that, that blows out globular comet system right away. That a comet's tail can just whip down, destroy 13 cities in one swoop, and then carry on flying around. But as I read some of these other documents out, or so-called documents out, you'll hear and see that there's a lot of different types of comets and different kinds of things they do as well. It's quite strange. But I also found this other page called Dark Ages, and it actually has the first 1,000 years of weather records as well. I'll share the links for both the book and this website. And in the year 17, I noticed in this, it also says Asia Minor, earthquake, 12 cities wrecked. So this is kind of saying the same thing as this. Dozen fine cities at once. So I just thought I'd bring that up. But anyway, getting into this, like I say, I'm going to read out quite a lot, but I'm not going to read out all, I'm just going to skip. A lot of them are related to England because I'm from England and it's written in English, so I guess most people listening and watching these videos are English as well, so, or speak English. But anyway, so I'll crack on. So the first one recorded was 15 AD. Comet observed at Rome, pestilence in Asia, earthquake of tremendous violence next year. Apparently in Dion Cassius. Comet, earthquakes frequent, mock suns, so there was multiple suns in the sky. Famine at Rome, in the latter plague, numerous public officers died. In the year 62, comet and plague, it was during the approach of above comet to its perihelion that St. Paul was shipwrecked to the Isle of Malta. So in 67, a comet, destructive tempest in Campania. In the reign of Nero, a pestilence arose at Rome, which carried off 30,000 persons in a short time. If we credit Tacitus, the houses were full of dead bodies. Earthquakes at the same time in Hierapolis and in Laodicea. 600 sheep killed in Italy by vapour from an earthquake. The remark made by the Roman historian that there was no particular state of air or heat during this pestilence shows that by making an exemption of this case, he confirms conformity of others to the rule that remarkable weather attends it in general. Excuse me. In 79, comet with a very long tail in June, just before Vespasian died. It was followed by a long drought and heat, slighter epidemic, and in November, following by a tremendous eruption of Vesuvius, which was followed again by an earthquake that swallowed up Herculaneum and Pompeii. A pestilence followed in Rome in the year 80, and the same year was a terrible inundation in England, which much cattle perished. One of the most important things to be remarked in this period is the order of the phenomena, so often repeated since, but which will mark out the origin and nature of pestilence. The comet came first, then the drought, then the epidemics, authority, and Scotland infected with plague. We have no mention of comets or meteors accompanying the plagues of 102, 107, and 109. Fish actually died by thousands on the shores. In the year 117, comet observed at Rome. Antioch almost destroyed by an earthquake, accompanied by gales of wind, great overflows of the Tiber. Slight earthquake so frequent that Trajan limited the height of the Roman houses for fear of danger. A plague of flies at this time increased so as to make the emperor abandon his expedition against the Agarini in Arabia. 137. Comet followed by plague, Thames nearly dry, in London that is. Excuse me. 137, 169, yeah. Comet which was seen during a period of general pestilence in Europe, Africa and Asia, which began in 167 and ended in 180. An unusual gangrene of the feet was one symptom of this pestilence, analogous to that of the thumb, which I have related in Oxfordshire a few years ago. Although pestilence was almost universal at the period alluded to, the pretended historian Gibbon calls it the halcyon days of Rome. Antioch lost 100,000 persons by an earthquake. It's difficult to say what the long-tailed stars were, which Herodian describes as having been seen at Rome during the plague of the years 187 to 189. 211. Comet, the plague of London, flood of the Trent. 252. A very pestilential state of air now commenced, which, spreading in various directions, continued ravaged Europe and Asia and Africa for many years. It was attended by peculiar symptoms. Gibbon calculated near half the human race fell by this pestilence. Excuse me. 280. A comet, and 2 years after it, an earthquake in England. 298. Comet seen, earthquake in Syria, a dreadful plague distinguished by anthrax generally, followed by the emission in winter rains in Italy in 311. 321. A comet, a universal famine in Britain in 325. 335. A prodigiously large comet is recorded and was considered as a forerunner of the death of Constantine. Soon after its appearance, Syria and Sicilia were desolated with pestilence, and the Tweed overflowed. 339. Comet followed by earthquakes, deep snow in England in 341. Julian frustrated in 362. Comet and large meteors, the destruction of Nice and other cities by earthquakes in 367. Do not seem to have accompanied any comets on record. 383. Comet observed, plague of Rome and Syria. This comet was evidently the blazing star mentioned by Nicephorus, which was of a singular figure and was visible 30 days. Soon after this followed the filthy and horrible plague of locusts at Gaza and Ascalon. A comet recorded of huge size. Oops, was I going to do that? Yeah. A comet recorded of huge size and horrible aspect, followed by an earthquake near Constantinople and the plague. In 407, a comet of the most unusual appearance is described by Nicephorus like a cone of fire, but what the phenomenon really was is not yet cleared up. It lasted 4 months, during which time there were many luminous meteors and earthquakes in foreign countries. Pestilence and famine prevailed together for many months afterwards in most parts of Europe. 444. Comet repeated earthquakes in Turkey followed, and then fever, and lastly the plague most extensively. Great mortality among fish. The pabulum of plants seemed at length to be vitiated, and in England there was great scarcity. In 467. So, just a quick one. Apparently, Augustus was. The Rome fell around through Romulus around the year 476. So between these 2 years, apparently, is when Rome fell. But anyway, 467. Comet in the 311th Olympiad. Earthquake in Greece. Pestilence in Rome. In order to abridge the detail, I may observe that I find comets recorded in the years 480, 482, 499, 502, 518 and 525. In the latter case followed by the tremendous earthquake at Antioch. In 531, comet of great splendour, supposed to be the one whose period is 575 years, and which appeared 44 BC, plague in Wales. The sun very powerful for a long time, and it's very remarkable that the approach of the same comet in BC 1767 is recorded as having been attended with the same sort of powerless in the sun. And similar powerless will hereafter be found recorded in 1783, the year of the great meteor which happened on St. Helen's Day. This paleness was occasioned by the prevalence of vapour all over Europe during the eruption of Mount Hecla. In 590, a comet, a terrible pestilence in which Pope Pelagius died. This was characterized by affections of the brain that caused the patient to see dreadful phantoms, such as are described in year 79. The plague was sudden and universal. A long period of near half a century followed in which various epidemics of different degrees of malignity infested almost every part of Europe, accompanied at times by extraordinary visitations of locusts and other insects. The asserted by Eckhard that St. Gregory instituted a procession at Rome at this time in consequence of the plague, and that during its solemn progress upwards of 80 of the persons composing it fell down dead in the streets. According to Paulus Diaconus and others, this plague in some countries preceded death with great rapidity, often on the first attack. In some persons, sneezing was immediately followed by death, which gave rise to the custom of saying, "God bless you," when one sneezed. In others, gaping was a mortal sign, hence the custom still preserved in some places, after gaping, the sign of the cross. See also that inimitable code of ancient learning, Vitae Sanctorum, and Butler's Lives of the Saints, under March the 12th. 678. Comet in August, visible 3 months, followed by pestilence. 715. Yeah, this comet apparently is seen around every 343 years. I'm about to read out. Just so note that the next time, if it is still in circulation, would be the year 2086, so a few decades' time. Comet of great splendour, whose periods give it to the following years: 30, 372, 715, 1058, 1401, 1743, and I worked out 2086 as the next one, and so on. Soon after this comet in 715, epidemics began to prevail, and the malignity of the bane increased. It at length produced a destructive plague of the year 717, in which 300,000 persons died at Constantinople. 725. About this time, the plague raging in Turkey, and very remarkable vapour arose from the sea between two newly formed islands, Thera and Thracia. This vapour deposited a dense substance that hardened into a sort of pumice, which covered parts of Asia Minor. Can this throw any light into the hard substance called lunar stones, which are held down, ignited in the form of meteorites? So, in the year 729, comets, 2 in number, appeared in January, one seen in the morning and the other in the evening. Plague in Syria, the heavens are recorded as appearing as a flame, probably the effects of an aurora borealis. I think that's meant to be 744, but I put 774. Comet also seen, drought and great darkness followed, and in the sequel, the plague, in many countries at once. 760, comet, and in 762, 2 comets, followed by extraordinary cold, and Euxine again frozen. In March following, meteors and falling stars were very numerous, and in the hot summer which followed, pestilence, accompanied with the prodigious abundance of small flies. 771. Although no comet is recorded, this being an exception to the rule, the plague raged in Europe and 34,000 died of it at Chichester. The authority for this date is bad. 779, comet, followed by an earthquake at Constantinople. The year before, there was a great darkness in England for the space of a fortnight. The year 882. Comet with very large tail, followed by famine in Italy. Several following years, much plague and episodic. Ancient Italian and German writers mention comets followed by various atmospheric commotions and pestilence in 994, 912, 961, 968, and 975. In August, 981, 995, 1009, 1015, 1020. In the year 1032, eclipse of the sun, during which the air was of a saffron colour in 1037. Aurora borealis, comets again recorded with pestilence in 1042, with a deluge, 1053, 1066, 1068. In May 1074, 1091, 1094, 1096. In 1097, a comet in it. I can't speak, sorry. 1097, comet in October, followed by earthquakes of Syracuse, and the next year by the celebrated inundation in Kent, which formed Goodwin Sands. Excuse me. In the year 1101, extraordinary meter, destructive increase of butterflies. 1103, comet of peculiar colour and a new star sim for 3 weeks. Comets again recorded, followed by meteors and famine, with more or less pestilence in 1107, 1108, 1109, 1126, 1133, 1165, 1181. In 1186, unusual conjunction of the planets in Libra. The people then, being addicted to astrology, got frightened, and a fast was ordered by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Pestilence among cattle next year. In 1222, comet of great magnitude with a hot summer, as usual, followed by deep snow, then earthquakes, and also eruption of Mount Hecla. The whole period, indeed, from 1219 to 1226 was pestilential, the epidemic traversing Europe. From this time to 1230, no comet is recorded, though pestilence continued to prevail. But I can prove by the calculation of the chances that the probabilities of there being a comet during that time exceeds 39 to 2. I can also show that the chances render the comet probable every second year. In 1230, a comet. From this time to 1233, devastating pestilence broke in Italy, Denmark and France at once, and continued nearly the whole of 3 years. There was famine in England, and 20,000 persons are recorded to have starved. The comet alluded to passed its perihelion on January the 30th, 1231. In this, as in other cases, the summer and autumn of 1230, when the comet appeared, was intensely hot. Inundations in Rome followed, and pestilence raged the whole time, while the severe frost eventually succeeded in the last winter, and the plagues ceased. 1243, plague again in England, drought and meteors. 1252, plague broke out in London and Michaelmas, and overspread England through the winter. There was a murrain of sheep next year, and a curious disease became epidemic in the tongues of horses. 1256, comet, storms violent. In 1258, famine in England. 1268, comet following year, pestilence seized the Crusaders proceeding to the Holy Land. The comet continued visible. 1274, comet of fearful species. Rot among sheep was epidemic and first known in England. Dollar Z in 1277. Got to find out what that is. 1299. Comet per pass, 31st March. Prodigious mortality among Jews. It's quite strange that it would affect one type of people, but I thought I'd bring it up anyway. 1312. Comet, eruptions of Hecla, famine in Bohemia and in Poland. In England it prevailed in 1314. 1347. Comet recorded of frightful aspect. In the reign of Edward III, in the Ouse, there is recorded a flood just before the Ascension Day. The whole year was very unhealthy, and earthquakes abounded in Sicily and in Germany. In China there was what is called in the East a plague of insects. It ought to be particularly remarked as bearing directly on the doctrine which I have maintained, that in this, as in many other pestilential periods following comets, and during the play of nature in earthquakes, a general unhealthiness arose, which first showed itself in epidemic, sore throats, pleurisy, quinsy, spotted fever, and various other slight diseases. In varied succession, and lastly in the violence of the true Carboniferous plague, that it subsided in the same manner, the retrogressive order of the various disorders corresponding to their previous progression. In London, so great was the mortality that 50,000 bodies were buried in a week. Norwich lost nearly as many, Venice 100,000, Luba 90,000, and Florence 90,000, other cities in proportion. Spain is said to have lost 20 million. Parsons Malthus might have spared himself the trouble of this plan of preventing pauper weddings to check population. Phoebus has always taken care enough to thin the progeny of Venus without putting an extinguisher on the torch of Hymen, whatever that means. 1348. Plague continued. Denmark scourged by the sortie d'oie, or Black Death, in peculiar pestilence. The clergy suffered much at this time. Prodigious epizootic and universal death among fishes which had blotches on them. The pestilence was general except in Brabant and the country about Milan. So, 1351. Comet, 26th of November. Pestilence still general with long hot drought. A series of evils followed. In England, the strange epidemic madness is recorded, which was at its height in 1353, and soon after broke out the terrible plague by which Florence lost in 1358 100,000 citizens. Boccaccio, in his animated Descriptions della Peste de Firenze, rightly ascribes this pestilence to the state of the air. Petrarch says that few escaped it. Women and childbed were particularly singled out, and in the court there succeeded a murrain of beasts. Though no comet is recorded this precise year, I have satisfied myself by a calculation of the probability by 3 to 1 of there being one within our system at this time. 1361. Comet. Plague of England, France and Lombardy, and Scotland. 1373. Insanity visited the people as an epidemic. No one could call this contagious, and yet it spread as disorders do which are vulgarly called infectious. This epidemic determined the blood in such violence to the brain as to the occasion the delirium, often ending in madness, and it may be remarked that the disease prevailed while the volcanic eruptions of the next year were gathering. 1374. Violent volcanic eruptions, plague and famine abroad. 1380. Comet is approached our system. Epidemics began to prevail, and at length the plague succeeded and visited parts of Germany in 1381, and Etna was again on fire, and in 1382 a dead calm prevailed all the year. 1389. A singular meteor, fatal angina epidemic among children, followed next year by plague in the north of England. It was succeeded by fatal dysentery. Mr. Webster conjectures that during the burning of volcanoes, the same subterranean fire emits through various parts of the earth, and pestiferous weather bane. So in 1402, this was like 9/11. Comet again appeared in March, which was it? Was that the right one? No. Apparently, no. Oh, I don't know what I've had for that, sorry. Comet again appeared in March, whose period is 343 years. Oh yeah, that's the one that's on the cycle. See, anno 1744. 1406, Comet, the plague in London, only destroyed 30,000 people. In 1421, Comet, Z formed by dreadful floods, eruptions of Hecla. 426. Comet, hot summer, destructive earthquake in Spain, plague. I must pass over the epidemics for want of room and the authentic histories of them. So I've only got about 3 minutes left until my video ends, but I'd only got about halfway through them, but I'm pretty much saying almost the same thing over and over again, so I don't see the point in doing another video just to read almost the same. But there are quite different comets that come up and different types of bad weather and tempests and illnesses and epidemics that appear even up until the early 1800s, and it's just incredible that, you know, we are told that there was like the plague in the 1500s or whatever, but we're also told at that time, you know, people were going over to America, they were building magnificent architecture, there was just so much going on, but everyone was dying as well at the same time. So I don't know if some of this, if all of this, if any of this is true, but if it is, the comet season has kind of stopped from what it used to be like, showing that they're around pretty much almost every year. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to come back again at some point. But there's lots of them, and I really encourage everyone to download this and read this. I'll put the link below. And if anyone can come up with anything else, I know that the before and after date stuff has got a lot of interesting information in it as well, explaining how the atmosphere affects people and their mental state, their physical state, and it's generally a really good read. And there is also this website I found that if anyone wants to try and correlate this to find any different information with that, then please do. But I hope you enjoyed today, and if anyone does read this, please do put some comments down so you can let me know of anything else that I've not mentioned. And thanks for watching, everyone. God bless.